What if you are having breakfast? You notice your dog barking at something, and suddenly feel the ground shaking, so you and your wife hide in the basement. But when the coast is clear, you are shocked to see your house is split in half. Welcome to What a Story. The Norwegian government had planned to construct a railway tunnel in the Dovre mountains, which was met with opposition from environmentalists. However, the construction team disregarded their concerns and used explosives to open the cave. As they entered the cave to inspect their progress, the ground gave way, and they were buried alive by falling boulders. Upon hearing the news, the government dispatched air support to the area but found a devastating scene upon arrival. The construction site was destroyed, and none of the protesters survived. Several areas surrounding the cave had also collapsed, leaving strange human-like footprints. A female technician then showed a photograph she had taken while fixing the phone of an environmental protester. The image depicted a massive humanoid creature, resembling King Kong, hurling boulders at the construction site. This left the Prime Minister and generals baffled. To solve the mystery, the government decided to enlist the expertise of the most renowned paleontologist in the country. Nora, who had recently led a successful dinosaur excavation team, was brought in by military helicopter to meet with high-level officials. Nora explained that the largest known primate was only 4 meters tall, while the creature in the video was a massive 40 meters tall. Given its seemingly supernatural abilities, the only way to solve the mystery was to investigate the scene in person. Meanwhile, an elderly couple in the vicinity of the Dovre Mountains was having lunch when their dog started barking in the distance. Suddenly, a violent tremor shook their house, and they rushed to the basement for safety. When the commotion stopped, they emerged to find their home in ruins and a massive footprint nearby. Nora arrived by helicopter and met with Captain Chris, who took them to investigate the footprint. Nora detected a primitive smell but found nothing else. They followed the footprints in a helicopter but lost track of them 20 kilometers away. Despite using thermal imaging to search the area, the army found no signs of life, and the trail went cold. To uncover the truth, Nora recalled her childhood memories of her father telling stories about mountain monsters. Once, there was a legend of a mountain monster's wedding. During the celebration, 13 monsters drank too much and lost track of time. As the sun rose, it turned them all into stone. The mountains in the area were said to be made from those 13 monsters. Nora later found her elderly father, and returned to where the footprints had disappeared. Using a map, they compared the surroundings, and her father noticed that the terrain was different from the map.
Papa?
Suddenly, a huge eye opened behind them, and a huge stone monster with a tail slowly crawled up. Nora and her father rushed to the helicopter, and the monster didn't attack them, but kept roaring at the helicopter. The government agencies synced the footage, but Nora said they knew nothing about this unknown creature. She wanted to try communicating with it, but the Secretary of Defense thought heat weapons could handle anything on Earth. Thus, the army was sent to intercept the monster, attacking it when they saw its figure. However, the rocket launcher only caused minor damage. After the smoke cleared, the enraged monster rushed toward the army and destroyed tanks and armored vehicles within minutes. Nora and a few people took shelter behind a small slope, but the monster was attracted by the blood of wounded soldiers, and started attacking them. As the group tried to escape, Nora's father walked towards the monster with his hands in the air. The attempt to communicate with the mountain monster using language was met with a positive response, as the creature stopped moving and looked at them. However, the surviving soldiers in an armored car started shooting at the monster, which then retaliated by throwing Nora's father with its tail and stomping on the armored car. Despite this, Nora's father smiled at the monster before he died, saying the words, "King" and "home." Nora later researched her father's notes and discovered that the mountain monster only appeared at night, and was afraid of sunlight, but this monster had appeared in the daytime. She remembered a legend about the monster throwing stones at a church, and devised a plan, which the Secretary of Defense initially ridiculed. However, with the help of Chris, they convinced the military to implement the plan. They flew towards the monster in 4 helicopters with giant bells on board, which caused the creature to cover its ears and wail. As they believed they had the situation under control, the mountain monster suddenly grabbed the ticket booth of the amusement park, and hurled it at one of the helicopters. This caused the remaining helicopters to be powerless against the monster, and it picked up one of the toy-like helicopters, and smashed it into another. However, the monster's behavior changed when it saw the helicopter about to crash into the fairground crowd. It grabbed the helicopter to prevent harm to the child. After releasing its rage, the mountain monster began to move toward the city. The people in the city were already in a state of panic as they watched the live broadcast. Other countries around the world were also surprised by the appearance of the unknown monster, with Japan referring to it as the Norwegian version of Godzilla. The Norwegian Prime Minister announced the mountain monster's arrival on the news, which prompted a state of emergency. Despite the government's best efforts to control the situation, all their previous attempts had failed, and they could only arrange for the city's evacuation. Nora found herself stuck in traffic, but refused to give up and held on to her father's notes. She remembered that her father had mentioned a name, Ricard, before he died. The Prime Minister's secretary had heard of Ricard, and told Nora that he was the official minister of the palace. So, Nora and the secretary went to the palace and found Ricard, who recognized Nora immediately. It turned out that Ricard had known Nora's father for a long time, and he took them to the palace garage. He opened a secret passage, and they entered a large space with a massive pile of skeletons in front of them. Ricard revealed that this place was once the home of the mountain monster. Thousands of years ago, when Norway was being converted to Christianity, most of the monsters were slaughtered. However, one of the descendants of the Monster King managed to escape to the Dovre Mountains. People searched for it but failed to find it, assuming it had died. However, it was awakened when a tunnel was built in the mountains. The mountain monster came out to find its home. Nora found that the skeletons in front of her began to melt when she used ultraviolet light. They realized that the mountain monster was sensitive to sunlight, which was why it only appeared during cloudy days. Nora informed Chris, who was helping with the evacuation, about the monster's weakness while Ricard prepared a vehicle for them. The military's attempt to block the mountain monster's path into the city had failed, leading the Prime Minister to authorize the use of small nuclear missiles to stop the creature. At the same time, Nora and the secretary arrived in a truck carrying a large object covered by a curtain. When they passed the monster, they revealed the skull of its ancestor, which caught the monster's attention and caused it to chase after them. Meanwhile, Chris and his team were setting up UV lights in a nearby park. The truck dropped the skull in the middle of the road, and the mountain monster picked it up and let out a cry, seemingly remembering something. The monster chased after the truck, eventually catching up to Nora and the secretary at the edge of the park. As the monster swung its hand towards them, Nora jumped out of the car to avoid it, while the monster entered the area where Chris and his team had set up the UV lights. The soldiers obeyed his orders and directed their UV lights at the mountain monster, causing it to become immobile. Simultaneously, military fighter jets carrying nuclear missiles approached the monster. When the order to launch the missiles was given, the defense minister attempted to follow through, despite the presence of civilians, but a female technician knocked him down. The crowd cheered as they saw the monster suffering in the ultraviolet light. However, Nora couldn't stand the sight, and believed killing an intelligent being like the mountain monster was wrong. So, she turned off the UV light and approached the creature, asking it to leave and return to the mountain. The mountain monster seemed to understand, and started to move, but it was too late as the sun's rays had already touched its body. According to legend, the mountain monster collapsed into a heap of rocks in the sunlight. And so the crisis was over. Little did they know, in a distant location within the Dovre Mountains, a new mountain monster arose from the ground after the tunnel had been destroyed. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next story.